go. So hello, Larry. Thanks for being here. I wanted to try some kind of new format with you. So it's not going to be an interview, it's going to be a discussion. And the subject I chose today is the subtask, which is something that is discussed a lot in the community, especially since Asana added the subtask in the main task list. Little disclaimer, we are today March 5th, 2020. So maybe when you watch the video, some things will be changed inside Asana. Okay, so I have a first question with you. How much do you use Subtask?
So I use them a lot. First, it's nice to be here and good to see you again. I use them quite a bit. I think maybe more than a lot of other people. I'm not afraid of them, and I think they're really good if used correctly. But I definitely avoid their use in a lot of cases. Okay.
Did you change your way of using the subtask as you became more and more confident with Asana?
I think so, yes. I guess there's sort of I ended up moving a lot of things from description into subsections and subtasks. So I guess when we talk about subtasks, we should probably point out that we're really talking about both subsections and subtasks, since you can have both. And the subsections are a little tough because there's no way to know, they're not very discoverable when you're talking about subtask sections. You have to type tab N in the detail pane to manifest one of those.
And a couple of months ago, Asana made this huge migration for sections. So actually sections became columns. We've had a lot of work to do, you and I, for our product to keep working, but they did not do anything about the subtask section. So the subtask sections are still that dumb kind of task, and that did not evolve. Do you think they're going to evolve soon, or do you think they're going to stay this way?
I think that they will. I'm not sure they're called separators now to distinguish them from sections. And my tasks is that way too. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I wish I had a crystal ball, but I'm imagining that they're not making us. I hope they won't do away with subtask sections, and I'm assuming that they have some overhaul that they're working on for the detail pane. And they'd rather just wait and, make that correct when they do the larger change and do kind of everything at once. But
because
who knows?
For a long time, we thought that they actually forgot about subtasks because they didn't do a lot of things regarding new features. But I think they started again. Maybe they hired some new people and have a bigger team now so they can focus on the subtask again.
Right. I think I might have heard at one point they had a subtask team, and that's
really
resulted in some of the changes that we've seen already, which maybe we'll talk about later.
Okay.
I guess at a more general level, I want to hear how do you approach subtasks, and I can tell you how I approach them as well.
For me, it's a way to split a task into small pieces without having to deal with a separate subtask. Or separate task. I use them a lot on a daily basis in my developer job, because every time I take a new story to work on at work, I always split it into several subtasks. And every time I complete a subtask, I usually delete the subtask. This is a question I'm going to ask you later, what you do with the subtask you complete. But for one story I work on, I could have like 50 or maybe 60 subtasks sometimes. It's a very messy thing I do, but it's my own way of using the subtask most of the time.
Right. Yeah, I do the same thing. I'm not afraid of having 60 of them if that's the right thing to do. I don't really mind at all. In fact, I really am glad when I can do that, because that means that there's 60 fewer things that are in the main tasks section of a project. So I think subtasks, one of the main benefits is it can simplify the project.
But one of the issue I always tell my clients is the subtasks are always in the right pane of the screen, which is a very small area. You don't see a lot of details. You don't see the tags. You don't see the custom field. And when do you feel like a big task should become an entire project?
That's $1 million question. I think
it depends.
That depends. Well, we could plug your upcoming ebook, Secrets of Successful Teams in Asana, because there's a whole article that I contributed, a chapter I contributed called Architectural Balance in Asana, which is a very lofty title, where I try to address exactly that question. And I kind of think of it that you know, if you find that you've got too many subtasks and it's too constrained in there, you know, there's too many subsections, subtasks, it's too long, you know, whatever it might be, or they're more important than you think. I sort of think about shifting that to the left. So promote those to tasks.
But the thing is, they just introduced the subtask inside the main task list. So it doesn't really make sense now to convert to projects, especially because they also added the custom field to the subtask.
Well, that's a whole separate question. So that's true. They've made it a lot easier with the, you know, the collapse and expand, you know, twisty arrow. You can now see the first level of subtasks underneath a task, which is a great thing. And it even exposes the second level more easily, because if you then do open up the detail pane for any one of those, you can now very easily descend to a level that you couldn't before, the subtask.
Yeah,
you see those as subtasks in the detail pane.
It's actually my next question, because people might not realize that you can have as many levels as you need. I'm not sure you have a technical limitation. I think you do, maybe 12 or 15.
I think it might be as few as 5. I think neither of us know, so maybe we shouldn't be the ones on the discussion, but somewhere between 5 and infinite.
Yeah, I think you should not go. I think you should not go that deep inside the subtask. What do you feel?
I agree. I make that kind of a standard recommendation, that don't go really, you know, more than one level, although now maybe you could go 2 levels because of that expand collapse, which is a little clunky. I've never liked expand collapse sections in user interfaces, which is my background, designing user interfaces. But, you know, and people already are asking for expand all, collapse all, remember the state of the expand collapse, you know, based on the, you know, the default project view settings and things like that. And that's all the reasons why I don't like them, is because you end up clicking a lot rather than just navigating. So it's beneficial, just over nothing, I suppose. So yeah, I would not do more than what you can conveniently see. So for example,
so now it's 2 levels because they added the first level inside the main.
That's right. So the second level, since you can pretty easily open up the detail pane and see the task section and subtask of what's already a subtask. So that's a subtask. And I wonder if we, at some point, maybe we need a screen share we could do, but so
maybe you can share your screen so we can show how it looks to have 2 levels.
This might be easier. So, you know, so here's some sections and tasks. And then as we were talking, you don't see it? Whoops.
Oh, it's coming. Yeah, it's good.
All right, there we go. So some sections and tasks in a list view. And if I expand this, I'll see that task 2 has a subsection A and a subsection done and some subtasks of task 2. But what we're also talking about is it says there's 4 subtasks here. If I expand this, I'll essentially see the same thing up and down here in the detail pane as I do over here.
So the 4 is actually the incomplete subtask, including the sections.
That's confusing. That's right. I think that's what that's doing. Because if I mark this complete, well.
Oh, actually, it might be 4 tasks and they don't count the sections.
They don't count the sections, probably. Okay,
yeah. Right. And if you close the pane on the right,
there's a 5.
If you close the right pane, the filter with all task incomplete, complete, does it work on subtask as well? Yeah, it does.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, so I guess what I was saying is when, here we're looking at the same thing because we're just expanding the task that's already expanded. But what I was pointing out is here you can now expand a subtask. And if it has subtasks, these are really subtask,
Yeah.
A1-A or 1. So now I guess what I'm saying is at this point, what I would recommend is if you can see it here, feel free to use it. So you could use a date, an assignee, and obviously the title of the subtask, but I wouldn't get involved in more information like a description or subtask, because now you'll have to descend into that. And that starts to become pretty difficult for most people and slow to work with. So I would say just stick with what you can actually see right here is my recommendation.
And what's good, and I think it wasn't always the case, is that at the top of the right pane, you have the actual hierarchy to go back up the chain. But what's confusing is it kind of looks like your subtask is part of the project when it actually not part of the project.
Right.
And
That's
we know that because we use Asana a lot, but the subtasks, they are not part of the project, even though they now show up in the main list, they are still not part of the project. And it has a lot of consequences. I think we can actually talk about those now. The subtask, you can't, the workload feature does not work on subtask because they're not part of the project. You don't see the subtask inside the calendar view. You don't see them inside the timeline. So I think it's becoming very confusing because you really think like they are part of the project when they're not.
Right. So if you stick to what we said before, which is just only using subtasks for the purpose of breaking down a higher level task, and then also I guess using it to break down a task, or for that what's called progressive disclosure, just hiding information, not having it appear in the main task list so you can focus on the higher level things and then click into it and see the detail. If you use it for those purposes, you probably don't have to worry about the fact that the subtasks are not members of the project. So that's probably okay. If you start to make subtasks that start to get assigned to people and they have more detail, and then they need to be assigned to other projects or become, have other project membership, that's where you start to run into trouble. You can do it, but you have to manually do it. And you can even, maybe we should show you can also bring a subtask back into the parent project. I don't know.
Exactly. I wanted to talk about that because I think it's a very bad idea. It's a bad solution to an actual problem. And it becomes very confusing for people to have the subtask as part of the actual project. Can you show us an example, see how it looks?
Yeah, so why don't I select this subtask A1, and now the add to project is there for parent level tasks, but for subtasks you have to do tab P or choose it here. And now if I choose the subtask demo project, that's the one I'm in already. That's this one right here. So if I do that, we'll see what happens.
Oh my God.
So we just added this line at the top. So what it's showing is that, so it added a new task. If I remove this X here, this will go away. And it's showing, this is the task, which is actually a subtask. And then it's showing the parent. So if there is a parent, you get an arrow pointing to the subtask and the parent. And then you get the indicator
of the subtask in this case.
Of the subs, right? How many it has it has this one. That's what it's counting here. So if that hasn't confused everybody, then I don't know what we'll have to try harder for the next time. But so you could, what a lot of people do is they'll add a subtasks of this project section.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe.
So this
And
way you can see them in the timeline and you can count them inside the workload.
right. So maybe
But
this
it's
isn't
very
so bad.
hard. Yeah, but it's very hard not to forget any subtask. It's easy to forget one or two or three or maybe more, especially if
Right.
people don't understand this very weird way of organizing things with
Right.
subtask coming back to the main project.
Right. So I'd say, like a rule of thumb, I would not recommend doing this, but if you have a project that can really benefit from this and you know what you're doing, by all means, you should use it, as long as everyone in the project is comfortable. And the same with all those other rules of thumb that we mentioned already, like don't go descend more than 2 levels of subtask. Well, you may have you may be trying to represent some hierarchical information in Asana, and you may want to use up all 5 levels because you understand that. And the 5 levels, you could actually consider actually more than that, because you could consider the subsection here to be a level and the subtask to be another level. So you could almost construct 10 levels or so. And I kind of know about this because in Asana To Go, I have a mind map feature to bring in or export one, and it gets into these questions.
Okay.
But
can you
so,
confirm? Yeah. Can you confirm that a task cannot be a subtask of several tasks? A task cannot be a subtask of several tasks.
Yeah. How would I prove that negative? I don't.
Does it have? Do they still have the option add a subtask of on a task?
Yeah, you can advanced actions. You can make a subtask of. So let's see. I'm getting confused. Currently, subtask A1, which is what is a subtask of task 2. So if I make it a subtask of task
what's funny is it's complicated, but the names actually help us with 1, 2, 3, A, B, C. But when you have actual tasks with actual names, it just becomes a nightmare.
It's impossible. Yeah, right. We're making it easy here.
What does it do if you select?
Okay, so I think if I can only select one at a time, so that's the giveaway, I think, here. And it just moved it.
Okay, it replaced the parent task for the subtask.
So it's now up here instead of down there.
Okay, all right.
So which makes sense.
Good. So what would you say a subtask is good for, and what are they bad for?
I think, information hiding or, progressive disclosure, like here, this task 2, you can just close it up and know that task 2 has some content here and only look at it when you need to. And then breaking down a complex thing that you don't want to break down in sections and tasks. It's at the task level you want to break it down through there. And I think simplifying your everything up above, like the project, you may be able, actually, with the use of subtasks, to even eliminate a project. Like one example I thought of is, let's say you have a monthly meeting that you do planning for. You might be tempted to make a project that's, planning for, meetup in April. So you have a project like that with your tasks. But if you were more a user of subtasks, you might make the April planning be a task, and all of the steps within the planning for April would be subtasks. And that means that your project could have just one task for every meeting, which makes sense that you've got a project for this whole meetup, this particular meetup, and then each line is about each month of the meetup. So it can structure your information and allow you to compress it more. That's how I think of subtasks.
Okay.
And you, any additions? Or?
No, I don't think so. I always try to convince my clients not to use subtask too much because of the limitations we talked about. The fact that it's always in the right, small right pane of the screen, and that you don't see a lot of information on them. But it's very hard sometimes to convince them, because it feels natural for them to just split something and then assign the pieces to people.
Right, right. And we should probably mention this, the full screen or focus mode, tab X.
Exactly.
Which is handy. So that will just allow you to focus on the selected task or subtask. So in this case, it takes over, and maybe the problem that your clients have is they can get around this a little bit by just focusing here, and you've got some breathing room.
There's actually another big problem I talked with a client about today, which is the subtask status is not related to the task status, which means if you complete the task, it does not complete the subtask. And if you complete all the subtasks, it does not complete the main task. I think it's a good thing. I wouldn't want this behavior to happen, but it creates a lot of noise in people's Asana account because they have a lot of subtasks which are not done even though the main task is done. So it requires a lot of work to always complete the subtask whenever you complete a task.
That's right. Definitely a lot of pushback on that, and they're not automatic dependencies that you might think that they would be, that when the subtasks are done, the task is done, you have to manually do it.
Maybe they're going to introduce some new rules with the automation feature to do this kind of thing.
That would be nice. And we should probably, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, we should probably pick up a point that we left earlier, which is that maybe it's that the first level of subtasks inherit the custom fields if you're a paying customer, which you have to be for custom fields, any plan level. So the subtasks at the first level will assume the custom fields of the parent project's tasks. That's a double-edged sword. Now, I wonder if I can really quickly add a custom field here.
I think it was one of the most requested feature on the community to have the custom field on the subtask. And that's the reason why people started to add the subtask as task of the project.
Right. But I don't know that there's some complaints about this because a lot of us are not so happy about the fact that it's automatically added. Because we were maybe using subtasks for a different purpose, but so I have a status field. I'll set this one to on track. Maybe I'll set this one to ahead of track. So, this may be a custom field that I wanted to set on these parent level tasks, but who knows what I'm, doing with these subtasks here. So now, if I go look at subtask A2, well, it's got the status field. Now, that can be confusing if you don't want to set that custom field on the subtask. And also it can be confusing if the subtask, like we said before, belonged to another project. And that project brings in its custom fields.
Yeah, then the custom fields adds up in the task.
Right. So now it's because a task is the merger of or union of custom fields in all of the projects to which it belongs.
But I don't really see them going back on the fact that the subtasks get the custom field of the project. Now that they introduced this, I don't see them going back and removing that feature.
Right, because it makes sense when you expand it that you'd like to be able to, to set that here. It kind of makes sense. But, there are definitely there's some unhappiness about that, but it's also certainly useful at a lot of times when you just want to add another level of detail and hide the detail, but you don't want to be prevented from setting the status. So that is nice. But some people would like it to be optional. Which would be nice, but there's rarely any settings that the user can choose for these
Asana
things.
does not really have that philosophy, I think, of letting people choose to have some kind of features or not.
Right. I think they're guessing they're trying to keep it simple as possible.
Yeah, exactly.
To use as possible.
We've talked about the fact that the subtask is not part of the project, and one of the things we did not look at is the advanced search. Because if you look for all the tasks within a project, I think the subtasks don't come up. have to select a specific option for them to come up. You have to go to the add filter option and select this special. If you go to add filter,
should I try it this way first and then
sure.
See what happens? So I'm just looking for all the tasks in the project.
Oh, so it does give you the subtask now. Okay, my bad.
So this changed a while ago, and I've kind of lost track. But yeah, so yeah, you can see this. You can tell immediately because they've got this, arrow.
And now, if you go to refine the search in the top right corner, if you go to the add filter, you have in the more you have the subtask filter, which allows you to only see the subtask if you want to.
There we go. So they all have the pointer there. And what is nice, this is what also makes subtasks nice too, is if you are using them, if you put information in the subtask, invariably you're going to want to pop out a level up, pop up a level to the top. You can always do that. Just click on the task, and then the parent is always here, or the whole stack of parent levels. If there's more than one subtask level, you can always get here, and then you can go back down here.
And so how do you clean up the subtask when you have like 50 subtasks and you have 30 completed subtasks? Do you push them at the bottom? Do you delete them? Do you have a special section to put them in?
I probably do all of the above, depending on what it is. If this area gets incredibly long, like sometimes if I'm, adding a feature to Asana to go, I'm probably very interested in it as I'm doing it, and I'll probably never look at it again, but I might want to go back historically sometime. That's the time when I might have a ton of subtasks, and I'm definitely interested in the active ones. And there could be, huge gaps of, like a lot of ones that I finished. Exactly. Now there's a new one. Now there's a lot of ones, that are done, and I tend to group them. So what I'll do is, let me just.
You have a subsection done in which you push everything that's done. Okay.
So here I'll hit Tab N because it would be nice if this thing, add subtask, looked like this thing, which would let you add a section or a subtask, which I've made.
The Tab N does work in the task panel.
It does, right, but it'd be nice if it was a control like that. There's a forum feedback that you can vote on if you want.
I never use those control anymore. Always use the keyboard shortcut.
Right. If you don't know about it though, the control is nice. So down here, you have to remember, I'm going to hit Tab N now. Now I've got a new section for done. And then, as I've, like these two, I mark them, or select them both and drag them down here.
Okay.
And now I've got all the active ones here and all the inactive ones here. That's what you do, I assume, too.
Most of the time, the subtasks I create are very messy, just like reminders, and I can delete them easily. So I usually delete, after a couple of completed ones, I just delete them all to start fresh with only the incompleted ones in the list.
And that's by just selecting multiple ones and then very carefully choosing this.
Whoa, okay. No, I always use the keyboard shortcut.
You could choose this, but don't choose this.
I have the same problem, because depending on where the focus is of your mouse, then the tab backspace will actually delete the task. So I have the same issue.
Can you undo that? Or
yes,
I guess if you're quick, you can undo that.
Yeah, you have a little snack message in the bottom left corner that you can undo. And I think you also have a red ribbon at the top of the task saying that it was deleted, because it stays open on the right.
Right. That's right.
You talked earlier about the choose between subtask and description. Can you talk about that a little?
Oh yeah, that's a good point. So actually made a couple of notes, and I want to remember that. So if the description field here has, you could
you can do a lot of things inside now.
Yeah, you can enumerate.
Text, yeah.
Right. I mean, you could make a numbered list, which might be nice, or a bulleted list.
You can even use emojis to convey the completion information. You could have mark emoji.
Right. So you can do almost anything in here with the rich text editing, and you can have boldface, you can have sections. You could sort of, say, I'm just going to boldface that, and now it looks like I've got a kind of a heading and content. Whoops, those are already bold, but something, I can't seem to unbold it. Oh well.
Oh, doesn't work. It's a bug.
But that if you have a whole variety of stuff that you want to do, you can put it in the description. But a lot of information falls into, for me, I just want to make a heading and then a list of things. And you could do that in here, but it's actually easier to do it up here. I could just type a few items and then type a section and a few more items. And then what's really nice is I can drag them around if I want to, put these three up here, I can drag them.
I have a question for you. Let's say that you have a project and each task is a client, and you want to store client information like name, email, phone number. Do you use, let's say you don't have custom field, because I think custom field would be the way to do it. But let's say you don't have them. Do you use the description to store that information, or do you use one subtask with like name, the name of the person, email, etc.?
I have gone back and forth on that for sure. Name, phone. You could do it that way.
I don't really see the point of using subtask. I think in this case, it's easier to use the description.
I think so. It just kind of, again, it depends. If you've got a form that you want to make crystal clear, and maybe even it's a template that people are filling out, it can be a little clearer if you have these these captions and blank fields under them. People will know to fill them in.
Yeah, what's good about the subtask though is that it's actually a task, so you can comment on it. So let's say you want to store the address of someone, you can actually store the previous addresses or some detailed information on how to get to that address inside the comments of the subtask.
Right. I think you're probably right. You could very easily do that in a form, not unlike the way Asana Forms puts the caption value pairs in the description, when you submit a form.
Yep.
That's probably simpler. But if you are structuring, two-level hierarchy, it's usually easier just to do it as a subtask, and you have the added benefit that you can drag things around, which is really hard to cut, copy, and paste from here.
Exactly. Yeah.
The formatting. So if you're just making an enumerated list, probably a lot of people don't do it as subsection subtasks or just subtasks, and you probably get by easier that way. And then you do have the benefit, if you really want to mark them complete, you could do it with an emoji up here, but it is sort of, it's got a purpose-built check mark here for that. And if you happen to want to turn it into a task, like you want to promote it, maybe assign it to yourself to get it on your My Task list, your subtask, you can do it from a subtask, but you couldn't do it if you put it up here.
Yep.
So I think you could use one, the other, or both together, and it's really different. Yeah, really different depending on each thing. That's right.
Okay, thanks. I think I don't have any more questions. Do you want to add anything about the subtask subject?
Looking over my list.
Did you think we could talk 30 minutes about subtask?
We could talk. I don't think anybody could listen.
We'll see.
I guess that's to be determined still. But yeah, no, I actually thought we could because there's a lot to it, but I think we covered everything. Not in the order that I expected, but we covered everything. So.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Pascal.
And let's see if we do another episode on another feature in Asana.
I look forward to it.
Thanks.
Thanks.